Yo, welcome back, y'all. So today I'm doing part 3 of Absence Analytics, and I'm going to show you how to build this entire dashboard from scratch, and we can finally have a complete dashboard built from the ground up. But as you know, before we proceed, go ahead, hit that subscribe button down below, leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what kind of content you want. I can build that out for you. With that said, let's get started. So usually my first process is trying to figure out a color scheme. So there's numerous ways to do it. My rule of thumb is to find a primary color and then two supporting colors. So as you can see for this one, I did a dark blue and then kind of a lighter blue and then a gray undertone as well, just to provide some contrast, because what I don't want is I don't want too many bold colors. So I always want to have three colors, and sometimes you can have more. It just depends on how much darkness you really have within your dashboard. You don't really want too much, because then you want to identify the main points within your dashboard with those bright bold colors, and then everything else is kind of supporting those main points, right? Such as your KPIs. So what I'm going to go ahead and do first, I'm going to go ahead and insert a shape. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out that banner that I initially created. I'm just going to maximize this out a little bit. And as you can see, it comes in as this dark blue color by default, right? So I want to make sure I'm selected here. I want to go ahead and expand all categories. And I always do this for format shape because it's going to let me see all my different options from the top down, right? Now, shape is going to provide you the option to go ahead and change the shape if you so desire. You could also round the corners, you could change rotation, the fill color, borders, add some text if you want, add a shadow, bunch of other things, right? The general is going to be kind of your properties, so dimensions, padding, a different title. So we're talking a header title for this shape specifically. We have more background options, border options as well here. And then we have tooltips we can add as well if we so desire. Now I don't use tooltips for shapes. All I'm going to do simply for this one, I'm just going to change the color. So I'm going to click on my color. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to more colors now. Now, if you know the actual color that you want, you can just go ahead and paste that in there, as I did, and now you can see that change that you made. I'm also going to layer another color on top of this. Going to minimize this a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and change the color here as well. And here we are. Now the good thing about Power BI is going to be, if I go back here, it's going to save those colors that I just used as the most recent colors, saving up to 10. Now, something you want to really look out for is when you see a shape that's default inserted, it's automatically going to give you a border as well. So what I do is I ensure that the border is either matched for the color that I'm using, or I use a black, or I use no border at all. It just depends on the color palette that you really want to utilize. But for this instance, I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to make sure this border is off too, because it's utilizing a different blue that I don't want. And what this does now, it aligns the shapes from the bottom so that they're both in line. So you don't want to have one border on one and no border on another. And now what I'll do is I'll simply add a text box, and I'm going to call this Absence Analytics. We're going to put this in the middle. We're going to shrink this up a little bit. We're going to highlight it. We're going to make it a little bit bigger. We're going to bold it. We're going to make that font white. And then we're going to simply drag this text box up here. We're going to shrink it up a little bit. Just got to play with the format some more. We don't want to see that scroll bar, so that's what we're trying to prevent right now. So I'm going to change it to 24 now. I want to ensure it's probably in the middle margin. So you saw that red bar. So that tells me that's in the middle. So I'm just going to leave it there. And now, as I have it highlighted, I'm going to go ahead and expand all the categories once again here for this shape. And I'm just going to turn the background off. And now we have a simple text that has no background, no outline, and we know exactly what the name is of our dashboard that we're looking at. Now, once again, if these are a little too big, you could just change the size of it depending on what you want. And I'd also ensure that it's just in the middle once again. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna copy this shape that I already had. I'm gonna use this as my menu bar. So I'm gonna go ahead and just minimize this a little bit. I'm gonna expand it all the way out. And now I have a cool looking bar that I can use to place some icons on top of for menus, back, forward, things like that. All right, so another thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build out where I wanna place my KPIs. And the reason I wanna place my KPIs on the top, and this is not the way, but it's a way, right? And the reason I often place KPIs on the top is because this is the first place people are gonna look. It's also the location that has the most contrast, it's gonna have the most icons, so it's really gonna pop out to the user, right? So this is really where I wanna put most of my effort into to ensure that all the information an end user would need is kind of codified within this KPI bar that I'm building. So something else I want to do is I want to maximize my space. So sometimes Power BI likes to auto adjust the format, and I don't want to go all the way to the end. I want to leave some space just so there's some contrast, right? So I can see the background a little bit. It makes the bar actually pop out some more. So I just left some white space around it. And if you want, you can bring it down a little bit so it's kind of even throughout the entire shape on all sides. All right, so we'll leave that there for the time being. I'm gonna start building other things as well. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my slicer. This is gonna help me filter down data points, right? So everything within a dashboard is going to be dynamic. Every dashboard that I build is dynamic, so there's no stale data points that are going to stay stagnant. But if there is any, I'll kind of brief them ahead of time. But for this one, there's not going to be any of those. And the reason we want dynamic dashboards is because we can see as you drill down into your slicers, you're able to see all the data points change depending on what you're doing on the front end, right? So this is where we're actually going to employ our absence date table that we created, and we're going to put the date in there. And remember what we did before, right, is now we're seeing the earliest absence request date that's in the entire table. And now we have the latest absence request date because it took that entire beginning and end date index and it put them all into one column. So now we have an entire range to look at, right? Rather than just looking at the begin date solely or the end date. Now we have options here, right? So now I can go to my visualization. I can go ahead, expand this out a little bit. I'll minimize this for the time being so you can see a little bit better. And what you have here are options within your slicer. So we want to do a between because what it does, it allows us to move the begin date, move the end date, and it'll change all the values that are associated to this dashboard. We also have a clear button, so we can go ahead and press that and it'll restore back to the default state. But what we're going to do once again is we're going to go back into the visual. We can make the header bold if we want to. I actually will keep it that way. And I'll make it black. So sometimes it goes to like this darkish kind of gray, almost black. But what we want to do is hit that dark black for this one specifically. Now, if you want to change a different color, by all means, do go for it, right? We can also place borders if we want. So if we want to delineate the header and kind of separate that from the actual date values, we can do that as well. So I will use this for this instance. I'm gonna put this dark blue color that we had, right? Now it's just kind of used as an accent. We can change the entire background of the item as well for the header. I'm gonna control Z, and oftentimes if you go into color like this and you change it but you can't revert back, what you want to do is control Z or go ahead and press the undo button. Now we have font color for values. Now if you have a drop down list like we will have, you could change that font color as well. But since we're using a slider, what I want to do instead is I just want to change a color here, right? So now we have that blue that's kind of added here as well, right? So now we're going to kind of complement the other colors that we have. All right, so now going into general, what I want to do is I just want to play around with this stuff a little bit, right? So I'm going to go to padding, just show you what padding does a little bit. So you can see how the item shifted to the left, right? So that just changes the spacing on the padding for each of the four sides of the item that you're looking at. We have background as well. Change the background color if we want. We're not going to do that. That looks kind of crazy, right? So we're just going to leave that as white. We can choose a border if we want to as well. That's going to make it stand out a little bit, make it a little bit more distinct, and show you a separation amongst other slicers that we may use or other visualizations. So we're probably going to keep that, to be honest. I just will probably change it to a lighter tone because I think it's a little bit too dark. So now you can see it's not too heavy. And the reason I don't like borders too much is because it's too catching on the eye. So I want to have a light undertone so that you can still see it's distinct. It has its own separate capability, right? Chart or slicer, but it doesn't take too much attention from what you're trying to have your users focus on, which is going to be your KPI bar. All right, so going back into general once again, and you're going to kind of see a theme is kind of going back and forth a lot just because it does take time to play around with it, learn it over time, and you'll get used to exactly where items are. You have a shadow, you can build a shadow if you want, but once again, I don't do this too much because it's too distracting. We also have a header icon, so this one's important, right? So this is going to change these three little icons we have up here. So what I like to do is I don't like to make them white because it's kind of hard to see. It blends in with the table or slicer or chart that you're looking at. So I like to give a little bit more contrast. You can do a black if you want, but it's kind of heavy, right? But it's only going to populate as you hover over the chart or slicer as the end user. So just keep that in mind, right? So what you want to probably do is choose a different color. What I did personally for this one, I chose kind of a goldish color. So I went into my color palette. I just changed the color a little bit, something not too heavy. And I just found a good mix here. And then I changed the actual icon to black. So now you can see it's not too heavy. It's not too distracting, and it still works with the overall color scheme that we're looking at. And something else I love to do is help tooltips. So what I did was I turned that on. I'm going to expand the help tooltip. And as you may have saw, you saw a question mark pop up. So the reason that we do this is because now I can insert a text. This slicer will support date band selection for all absences. And now if I hover over this, I can see this, right? But now we have a white background surrounded by a white canvas and a white slicer. Too much white, obviously, right? So we're going to play with this now. So we're going to change the color. So we're going to say black, and I'm going to change the color to white. And now we can see it's very distinct, it's very defined, and we're only going to see this type of tooltip when we're hovering over this icon. Nowhere else will we see it. But it is useful as an end user so that you can understand what this capability really does for you so that you can leverage it in full. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy and paste, and I want to retain this entire color scheme, which is why I copied and paste, right? So I'm going to go ahead and delete the date selection. I'm going to add in my absence workflow. Now it doesn't keep everything as you see here, but it does keep some stuff. What I don't like is I don't like the actual text itself is too large, right? So I'm going to go ahead and change that real quick so I can actually show you on this one. So we want to go all the way down to values, and we just want to change it just a tad bit. And here we are. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to control copy again, paste it. And you see how I leave a little gap between the charts as well, just to show that there's a different chart that I'm looking at. It's evenly spaced as well. That's just something else you can do to kind of help organize your charts, your visualizations, your tables, etc. I'm going to change this one to absence description now. And you see I retained the text size because I copied this one. So I'm just going to do the same thing once again. I'll go here, push it down just a little bit, make sure they're lined up, delete that one. Then I'm going to add absence name because that's the next one I want. And now I know that I don't have too much space left. So I'm going to start shrinking some stuff just so I can make room for what I need. So I'm going to control copy again. I'm going to paste this in here. I'm actually going to italicize this. And now it looks like I don't have enough room, right? There's other options you have now. So what you can do is you can go to your format page. I can go to my canvas setting and I could change the format size. So I'm going to change the height to, let's just say 1,000, and now have much more space to deal with, right? Now, if you want to change that back, you have to go to that specific sheet that you want to look at, change it, and then you can move forward from there. I recommend you keep one size universal throughout, and it does make it a little bit confusing for the end user if you do change dimensions because now you're looking at things very differently. I'm going to just go ahead and blow all these up now, right? I got a lot more space to play with, so we are good. So I'm going to move this all the way down here. I'm going to bring this thing down here too. I'll max this out a little bit. I'll bring this one down here. I'm going to pop that open a little bit. Bring the absence workflow down. I do actually want to filter out blank because there is no blank. So we're going to do that real quick. Put the slicer right here. And now I can blow up my KPIs a little bit, right? I can make my header a little bit bigger as well. Make this a little bit bigger too. All right, so after all the adjustments, this is kind of what it looks like, right? I have all my different filter selections, different slicers as they call it in Power BI on the left-hand side. So this is the rest of my canvas is going to be used for charts and visuals. But I'm going to add some more slicers just to kind of complete all the slicer options that we have to make it a little bit easier, right? So I'm going to go to my UIC table. My first one I want is brigade. But I don't want to see a selection like this. I actually want to see a drop down. So now I have a drop down selection. So if I want to select more than one at a time, I hold control click, or I could just do one at a time, right? And now I'm gonna close that up. I'll actually make this a little bit narrow, shorten this up a little bit. But they are giving me my primary slicers, so I'm going to leave them on my banner. And then what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to go ahead and expand it. I'm going to go to my background, I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to make the values black, and then I'm going to scroll down to background and I'm going to change it to white. So now you can see that the drop-down selection kind of pops, right? Now what I'm trying to do with this whole design scheme is I'm trying to limit the amount of white that I utilize just because it's really too much, it's too bright, right? So we want to utilize different colors to kind of focus the attention on the KPI bar that we're creating. The next one I'm going to do is battalion. So we're just going to copy and paste that one. And then the next one I'm going to do is company. Now we're actually going to relabel this, and you can relabel just by double clicking here. I'm going to call this company, troop, and battery. And it's literally that simple, right? So all you got to do is go ahead and double click, type it in, and you're good to go. Now don't forget to keep on editing your tooltip. Super important, right? If you don't edit your tooltip, it's going to retain what you already copied before. So just ensure you get to that over time. All right, so going back to the point of seeing too much white on your canvas, I'm personally not a fan of it just because it's too much, right? It's too heavy, it's too bright of a color. It's very distracting. So I try to undertone a lot of things, provide a lot of different other colors as well, just so it's easier on the eyes, right? And this is not the only concept you're going to get. This is actually the first one that you're getting in detail, but there's actually going to be a lot more that I'm going to build over time, and I'll show you step by step, just like I'm doing for absence analytics, on how you can really develop different concepts and use other color schemes as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a light gray behind this, right? But I want to turn that transparency off. So now what we have is we have items that now pop instantly. So we can see that instant interaction that we just had, right? So the gray makes everything above it kind of pop out. So we can see all these different selections pop. We can see that the KPI chart is popping even more, the shape so far at least, and we're kind of in a good place, right? We're steering in the right direction. So what I've also noticed here is that you might be able to see it too, is that there is a border around these three. So I'm just going to select all these three by hitting Control and selecting one at a time. And I'm going to go down a visual border on general. I'm just going to turn that off. Looks simple. It looks a part of the shape, to be quite honest, right? It looks like one solid piece as a whole. And now we could just continue on. All right, so the next thing we want to do is create a map. So I'm going to go ahead and just line this up a little bit. So it's lined up on the top with the date. And then I'm going to just blow this up close to the absence description just so I have more space on the bottom. I don't want to take up too much. And I want to go to absence analytics now, and I'm going to go to city because city is going to be my primary value. So that's going to be the location we're looking at, right? And then I want to go to my measure. So this could be a first time we're using a measure within a chart or anything in general for an actual dashboard, right? So this on absence measure that we created, this is going to show us who is in approved status currently right now based upon the date band selection or any other slicer selection that we have employed, right? So we didn't put too much criteria within that measure because we want to enable all of these slicers so that they can let the end user determine what they want to see. But they're only going to see who's in approved status because it's going to show the worldwide geographic disposition of those people. So I'm going to go ahead, click on the map once more. I'm going to go down to bubble size here, and I'm going to select on absence. I'm just going to drag that in there. And now you can see it looks a little bit smaller, but I can zoom in and I can see just by looking at all these where people are. So we got somebody in Richland, Montana. I believe that's Montana. But either way, we can also mess with this, right? So what we want to do is format this a little bit deeper. We could change the type if we want, depending on what you like. You can add zoom buttons if you want. You can add a lasso button. We could change the geocoding culture. We could change the bubble size if we want. I actually like to make them a little bit bigger, just like this, just so it's easier when you kind of zoom in a little bit. And we know that bigger size means more people. And you can reset it to wherever you want as well, just by clicking and dragging. You can change the colors if you like as well. And then we can show a heat map, but a heat map is just too foggy, so we don't want that either. Now, if we go to general, same thing, we got those properties. We want to change the title, and actually, I don't even want a title. So I'm just going to turn that off completely because we already know a map is a map, right? You can see the background's white right now. I don't even want a background to be honest, so I'm just going to turn that off too. Borders, we have none, don't need it. And they have more formatting options. You got tooltip options as well, and then text options if we really had any text options. Another thing I'd like you to consider as you're kind of developing your dashboard is the column names or measure names that you're inserting, right? I'd really recommend that you go ahead and just change the names. Don't really change the measure names because they're well defined here. They make sense, but you're changing them where they're going to be employed. So rather than seeing on absence kind of here, right, which kind of doesn't help you, what I want to do is just change this to total. And now if I hover over something, I can see total for that city that I'm looking at. And then if you want to know what this measure actually consists of, where this value is, you just hover over it and it gives you where it originated from. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create another shape. This one's going to be blue as well. And what I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to use this to be my reports bin. So I'm going to use this to basically let people know, hey, you can select something within this box and it's going to pop out a new data set for you. So I can't really align this with the map on the left margin as you can see right now because still reading the border even though it's not there, right? So I'm going to have to kind of just move this with my directional arrows and just kind of gauge it and see if it lines up. And once I believe it's perfect, it's lined up perfectly. And if you're OCD like me, matters. Now it looks good to me, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave that as is. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this text box as well. And the reason I copy this text box, if I can select it, is gonna be because I'm just gonna utilize the same exact format. I'm just gonna change the naming convention to something else. I'm gonna go ahead and minimize this a little bit. Go ahead and change that as well. And then I just kind of move it around until I find that happy middle ground. And once it looks good, I just kind of move off. All right, so we're going to leave that for the time being. I'm actually going to go ahead and build a chart now over here. So this one is going to be a cluster column chart. Make sure it's justified to the right hand side. I got a little bit more space between this and the map. I don't want to be too close. And if you ever get an instance where you don't want that much space, you just go ahead and move it to the right or left, depending on, which direction you're moving. And then with the directional arrows, and then you adjust the other side to the edge margin that you want. And now you got the space that you're looking for. All right, so the next one I'm gonna insert in here from Absence Analytics is gonna be Absence Workflow. And then I'm gonna use my value for name. So member name. I'll move this up here. And now I'm going to change this once again to total, right? Because that's the value that we're looking at. Because that's what I want to read when I hover over something, right? Is total. And now I'm just going to play with this a little bit, right? Because I don't want to see a white background. I just want to keep white for the slicers because that's my universal theme for this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and play with the formatting now a little bit. So I always change the values to black no matter where I'm working at, unless it's a dark theme that I'm building. I also like to italicize my headers sometimes. I also don't use these bottom headers because it doesn't make sense because I'm using a top header here. I don't also need this header here, so I'll remove that too. I also like to bold each X and Y axis values just so it's easier to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just find those gray ones, change them to black. I can increase the size if I want as well. I'm not going to. I don't think that's necessary. I can remove the total access, right? But for now, I'll keep it. I can also change the grid lines if I want to. But I'll leave that for now as well. I could change the bar color. So we know this bar color is actually not within my theme. So I want to change that. So I'm actually going to change it to my dark blue color. I want to turn on data labels because I want to see the entire value. And then I want to maximize the value section. I want to change this value color to black. I want to make them a little bit bold, a little bit more defined, italicize them a little bit. I want to change display unit to none because it's going to showcase the whole value. Yeah, decimal places, you can place it as 0 if you want to, just depends on what you want to see. I'm going to turn the background on because it provides some contrast, some pop for that data point. And now you can play with that contrast as well, depends on what you want to see once again, right? And now I'm going to go to general. I'm going to expand all this. I don't want to mess with any of the padding. I think we're good there. I think the title is also fine, but I'm going to change it to bold. I'm going to italicize that as well. I think the title size is good though. Background, I'm actually going to change the background to this color. Maybe make it a little bit more transparent so it's a little bit lighter. And then now you can see that the grid lines aren't as visible, right? So I'm going to have to go back and change that. And that's why I kind of waited to change that color. You can make a visual border if you want. Shadow as well. And then once again, your tooltips are going to be super important, right? Ensuring that you put that text in there. So I'm going to go back to my grid lines. And what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably put a white color. And now it's clearly identifiable where my grid lines are for each marker. I can also see that the top margin doesn't line up with the map. So I'm going to go ahead and just decrease that size just a little bit. And it's kind of a game to play, especially with the map. All right, so that's the best thing to get it for the time being. The next thing we're going to do is going to build a report here as well that's going to utilize some bookmarks. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and create a clustered bar chart right here next to the report box that we created. I'll make sure my margins line up. I'm going to line this up with a map as well to the best of my ability. Bump this over just so I know it lines up perfectly and we're good. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert from my UIC table my battalion. I'm going to put battalion company under the x-axis. I'm going to go back to absence analytics. And then what I want to do is I want to insert the absence workflow here. And I'm going to put total once again. And now all we got to do is just kind of play with the format a little bit, right? Let's just make it a little bit simple. So we're going to remove that. We're going to copy this. We're going to paste it. We're going to bring this over here. We're going to maximize this a little bit. We're going to maximize that a little bit. And then we're going to change this to a bar chart. And then we're just going to change the values. So I'm going to move this here to total. I'm going to drag the battalion over. I'm going to drag the company over as well. And now we basically have the same exact result, right? But now we don't have to format all over again. But this time what I want to do is I want to make the bars white. So I'm going to go ahead and go to visual. I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to find where my columns are. And the easiest way to really do is identify which color is where. So I can see this dark blue is the only time it's really used. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this to white. And now we have our color change. And then for background, for values, I'm just going to turn that off. I'm going to make the values a little bit larger, bolden them, and now they pop a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into general, and I'm going to change the title, all approved absences. Now we know in the default state it's not actually going to be all the approved absences, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go on a filter here. I'm going to bring in my absence workflow. I'm going to only select approved, and that's going to change the value here. So we're good here, and we're just going to hold this for now before we create a bookmark. But I will actually create a button for them. So we're going to go to buttons here. We're going to go to blank, and it goes all the way in this top left corner. So you're going to have to drag it down, pop it in the middle, change the format a little bit depending on what you want to see. Text, we're going to do all approved absences. We're going to change the font color to white. We're going to blow this up a little bit. We want it in the middle once again. And then we're just going to copy and paste this. Put that here. We're also going to remove the border because we don't want to see one. We're going to remove that. We're going to remove that as well for that one. And we're just going to change this next one. And we're just going to call this next one outside continental US. And we'll build that one here shortly in a second. All right, so the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to start building our card. So more KPIs here. So we're just going to make a card simply. We're going to customize the spacing for it a little bit. All right, we're going to put that here. And now all we're going to do is we're going to assign a measure to it. Nothing crazy at all. So I'm just going to put pending within 10 days, right? Now put that value right here. I'm going to resize it. I'm going to change the colors. I'm going to make it look how I exactly want it to look. I'm going to change the values to white. I'm going to change the category label to white as well. I'm going to change the background to this dark blue color that I want. I just want to make sure everything fits. I'm just going to minimize some things. And now what I want to do is I want to lift both of them up, right? So I'm going to utilize a padding, properties, and then padding. And then I'm just going to minimize the top one, and it's going to lift up the entire value set based upon how much I click backwards, right? So the larger the number is, the more it's going to push inward, and the smaller the number is, the more it's going to push outward, all right? So I have that here now. It's completely in the middle between these two. So we're at a good spot here. So I'm just going to control copy again. And now I'm just going to make a little bit more measures, right? They're going to be a little bit smaller just because I want to showcase as many data points as I can. So the next one is going to be pending absences. So I'm going to toss that in here. All right, put that right there. What we want to do is we want to make sure that this KPI is probably going to be the one that stands out the most. And the reason is because these are pending and about to start within 10 days. So we want to make sure this one pops out more. So it's the largest icon because it's the one that needs to be actioned the quickest, right? The others might be more insightful. They might not require decisions. So we're just going to use them as supporting KPIs. So now I'm just going to go ahead and change the font size because they're supporting KPIs, right? And now we have a distinct difference between the two. And I'm going to go ahead and control copy once again. I'll put those over here. I'm going to change this measure. So this one's going to be outside continental US. We already know we'll get the 1000 separator because we did that in the last video, right? The next one's going to be total absences. And then the one after that is going to be inside continental US. All right, so now we have all our KPIs we want down here. So now we're going to start building our KPIs up here. So same exact concept, really no change. So I'm just going to copy and paste all this up here, right? And this is why the shape in the background is important because what it's doing is it's masking the connection I would have if I was to put KPIs side by side. I would have to measure them appropriately. I would have to line them up. I would have to ensure that the right dimension width-wise, and that's just too much, right? So it's easier to just put a blank canvas behind it and whichever color that you deem is fit, and then just apply your measures in whichever sequence you want, and then your icons as well to kind of showcase that data point even further. All right, so I'm going to change the size up just a little bit. Probably going to go 22 here. I'm going to move it down with the directional pad because now I have a gap between the top of this background shape and the actual KPI. I could shrink this as well because I know I have extra space here. And then now I'm going to simply deselect the measure and apply the appropriate one. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to insert the authorized measure first into this one, and we're just going to go down the line now, right? So now what we want to do is take the assigned and insert it here. So we're just going to grab that out of the PSD one that we made, toss that in there. We're just going to insert that comma real quick. There we are. Control copy, paste it. Now just keep going down the line, right? So now we want to do is available. Next one is going to be available percentage. Next one we want to do is on absence. Then we're going to do on absence percentage. And the last one we're going to do is average days. All right, so now you can see how there's a little bit awkward spacing between each grouping here. So we want to do our best to try to align all of them so that it looks symmetrical. It doesn't look like it's just some random chaos that we put together. What you can do is change all the format width within general for each KPI to have the same width, and then you could just then simply have each border touch each other and then just kind of move around depending on what you see is best. So there's numerous ways to do it, but what I do is I kind of eye it. I zoom in a lot and I see what works best as long as they're even. So now let's just say it looks perfect. We want them exactly where we want them. And now we want to insert our images. So that's the next big thing, is where do we get our images from? Now what I do is I use this website that's listed here on the screen, and I'll leave a link down below as well. But essentially what I want to do is I want to identify what kind of icons I want to use, but I also want to ensure that I use the right color palette as well, right? So if I want to use a icon for authorized, what I'm going to use is a white calculator. And what I could do is I could simply select whichever one I want, and I could click on it. I could download it. I could select the size that I want, and you're probably going to want the smaller size just so you can fit it on the dashboard easier, and you don't really need a large icon. And then you go ahead and download it and then insert that image. So when you insert that image, you're going to go ahead and go to the bar here, and you're just going to simply click on image and then upload from wherever you saved that icon. And then it'll pop in and you'll be good to go. For this purpose, I kind of used a light blue one, and all I did was just resize it just so it looks the part, and I just clicked off of it. Once I felt like it was in a good spot, it was aligned, and now we have our total calculator authorized icon. All right, so after you're done with all that, this is what it's going to look like. You have all your data elements loaded, and it looks clean. You have your KPI bar now completed. So this is where people are really going to focus when they initially land on this dashboard, and then utilize everything else within it so that they can then achieve greater data insights. For example, if I want to click on brigade, I click on first brigade. Everything's going to be dynamic. I'm going to see everything change here. I'm going to see the map populate based upon, where people are geographically. I'm going to see what's in the queue. I'm gonna see what's approved. I'm gonna see all my adjustments change for my slicers because not everything is applicable to this brigade any longer. And I'm gonna see all my KPIs change as well. And same thing as you select battalions and then companies as well. Now, the last thing I really want to talk about is bookmarks. So bookmarks are going to be hugely beneficial when it comes to layering your dashboards. It can provide depth, so you're able to put so much detail into what you're really doing, so that it helps create more data within your dashboard. Now for bookmarks, right, what you really want to do first and foremost is create a starting point. So where is going to be your starting point for your dashboard that you're creating? So for this instance, I'm just going to say that this is going to be my starting point, right? So I want to make sure that when anybody lands on my dashboard, this is the page that they see. Now, obviously, you're going to have more reports built in here as well. We're not going to dive into each and every one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first go ahead and create a clear filters button here. So we're just going to kind of copy this one. We're going to put that over here. The effects is going to be that dark blue background. I'm going to do a visual border on this one because I want to see rounded corners. And then I'm going to change the text as well to be clear filters. And then I'm going to maximize this font a little bit too. I'm going to bolden it. maybe decrease the size now just a little bit. And here we are, right? I'm also going to create that by name list text box that I made as well. So I'm just going to copy and paste this one over here. And we won't resize it too much for the time being. We're going to make the background white. We're going to make the text blue. Now blow that up a little bit. We're going to say by name list. All right, so those are just my final touches on the dashboard. So this is going to be my default landing page, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to view. I'm going to click on bookmarks. And I'm going to click on selections. I'm going to minimize my data because I don't need to really see that. I don't really need to see visualizations as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bookmark. And this is going to be my snapshot in time. Now, it does not mean that my data is not going to move as new data comes in. It will, but what it's going to do is create a snapshot for the aesthetic that I'm looking at. And you'll see exactly what that means here in a second. So I'm just going to label this absence clear filters. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. I'm going to format my button. Going to go to action, bookmark, absence clear filters. And I won't really click on this button just yet because it won't be utilized yet. And then I'm going to apply that also to this one, absence clear filters, because this is also going to be my starting point chart. So all approved absences. So whether they're clicking on this or whether they're clicking on this, this is the default state this can go to. Now, what I want to do is I want to copy and paste this approved absences chart over the one that I have right now. So I'm going to move these out of the way for the time being again. I'm going to copy this, paste it. I'm going to ensure that it hovers over the exact same shape and I get all 4 red lines equally, as you can see right now. I'm going to let go. I'm going to pop my visualizations back open. I'm going to pop my data back open. And now what I want to do is I want to work on my outside continental US. So I already created my snapshot in time for all approved absences. Now I'm going to do it for outside continental US. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and ensure my selections are correct for what I'm trying to do there. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all those. I'm going to expand my absence analytics out. I'm going to insert my country code, my city. I'm going to put those in the same area. And then I'm going to get is outside US. Put that on my x-axis. I'm going to change this naming convention to total, following the general theme that we have. And then I'm going to go to my filters now. I'm going to remove the filter that I have on this visual because we copied it from the other one, right? I don't need that anymore. I'll go and insert this new one that we have. So are they outside the US? I'm going to say yes. Now I'll move this filter out of the way. And I'm going to go to my selection now. I'm going to find that other chart that's in the background there, which is all approved absences. I'm going to hide that. And now you don't see that other chart there in the background, right? I have all my countries here that are outside the US. I'm going to move this selection out of the way. And then I'm going to go to General. I'm going to change this chart name to Outside Continental US. I'm going to minimize these now. I'm going to go to my bookmarks. I'm going to add a new bookmark. And this is going to be Absence Outside Continental US. And the reason I use this kind of naming convention because it's clear, right? So as I'm applying that action button, I know exactly which one I want to select. So I can click anywhere off of it and now it's live. So now all I have to do is select this button, go to format buttons, turn it on, go to my bookmark, go to outside continental US. And now if I want to test what I have, right, the first thing I want to do is I want to either click on clear filters or all approved absences because they're going to do the same exact thing, right? And what I can do here easily is I can change this and go back to clear filters, right? But now you see that you can see both charts. We don't want to see both charts, right? So what this does with bookmarks is now you have to go back and take out that new layer that you added. So you have to go back into selection, hide the one that does not apply to the button that you're looking at, go to bookmarks, ensure that you're on the step that you're wanting to update. After you made your updates, go ahead and update. And now we can just toggle outside continental US, all approved absences. That's as simple as it gets, right? So you want to make sure all your selections are properly made, you're updating the right criteria, and then now you can toggle between any type of bookmark. This is the same thing when it comes to home pages, going back, forward, transparency, things that I've been building, menu navigation, using shapes, anything that you want, right? You could hide whatever you want that you made here because they're all nested on this page for selection. So everything that you've built is able to be hidden. And now the same concept with by name list, right? So if I create a table and I layered it underneath my map, so only when I click on all approved absences, a by name table will be enabled. I can create that by name table here, and then I could turn it on and make sure that selections are visible for those respective buttons that I want to look at so that this table is enabled, but for all the other ones, it's not enabled, right? But you also want to make sure that your map is hidden if it's not going to be visible. So you layer things appropriately. So this is just another way to get after data insights, right? Creating more clickology within your dashboard, creating more user interactions so that they can go in and see a wide depth of data across the spectrum. And the last thing as well, I know I mentioned it before, if you're on any of these slicers, just go ahead and make sure that you remove those blank ones. They're actually built there intentionally because there's another column that's supporting them, and you do that for the battalion and company as well. But first and foremost, what you want to do is ensure that you do all your slicer updates first before you do any bookmarks, because if you do bookmarks and then start updating things, what's going to happen is it may not connect to the bookmark that you're working on, so you have to go and update every single one. And the more bookmarks you make, the more time it takes, so you want to do things in a sequential manner just to simply stay organized. All right, so with that said, that is all I have for this dashboard, folks. I hope that it helped you as much as possible and that you're able to find new tips that can enable you to create more insightful dashboards. If you have any questions at all, please comment down below and I'll be happy to answer any and all of your questions. With that said, thanks for watching and until next time.